Let's look at the pop-up color out of position. That's when a person calls the preflop raise and finds himself out of position in a heads-up pot on the flop. Again, we have three main blocks: the lines, the sizings, and the preflop. The first block describes reactions to c-bets, folds on each street or raises, and right away showdown wins after raises. Plus bet describes a situation when a person raises on the flop and also bets the turn, or raises on the turn and then bets the river, or raises the flop, bets the turn, and bets the river. We also see the showdown winnings after each of the actions right away. Here we have the raise fold line on the flop, on the turn, and on the river, as well as raise flop, check turn, and then the river play, either check fold or bet. Main lines for the caller out of position are probe bets, check check on the flop, which means that the open raiser checks behind on the flop in position. Now we are on the turn, and the player can do the following: either bet or bet fold on the turn, or bet call turn check fold river, or bet turn and bet river, bet turn bet fold river, bet turn check fold river. We also have won a showdown after the aggressive actions. And then come the lines when he doesn't probe bet, but when he checks instead. Check check flop, check against the open raiser on the turn, faces a bet, reacts to the bet, either check fold, check call, or check call turn, check fold river, or check raises on the turn, check raise plus bet, or check raise plus check fold. Next we have check call flop, check check turn, and playing on the river. We can have a look at probe bet on the river. Here it is, as well as the reaction to our raise, or check call on the flop, check check turn, and then check on the river, we bet, and he either check folds, check calls, or check raises. The last scenario is check check flop, check check turn, and how it unfolds on the river: check fold, check call, check raise, or bet, bet fold, bet call. The whole block also has position tabs. Now we're looking at the total tab, but we can see how the big blind plays against all of the positions, as well as small blind against all the open raiser positions. Or we can look at playing versus specific stealing positions: big blind versus cutoff or button, or big blind versus early position. In this sizings block, we see the reaction against specific c-bet sizings. In this case, how a person folds against c-bet overbet on the flop, 62%. How he raises our c-bet of a specific size, that is, we make a small bet, 10 to 40%, and he raises 7.3%. If we bet a lot as an overbet, he raises 4.8. This orange bet means bet after a raise. Our opponent raised our specific sized c-bet, and then the orange number is how he bets on the turn. This information is useful to learn how our opponent tends to barrel after he decided to raise the flop. Let's say after we make a small size c-bet. And the yellow numbers are won at showdown after he raised our c-bet of specific size. The green stats are folds on the turn and on the river, which means the opponent called a flop c-bet of a specific size, the turn comes out, and he would fold 33% to any bet. If he doesn't call but folds, how often he would fold on the river? Again, to any turn bet and any river bet. That's 49%. We can also see that if he does not fold to overbet on the flop, he folds to turn bets, 37%, and then also 39% on the river. The last columns, size T and size R, show specific sizings on the turn and on the river, which means whatever the bet size on the flop was, our opponent folds to an overbet on the turn 47%, and 58% to c-bet overbet on the river. Next comes bet versus skip. That means probe bet on the turn. We check behind on the flop, and our opponent bets the turn. We see the sizings, we see the bet fold tendencies after one or the other sizing, as well as how he bets on the river. Let's say he makes a probe bet overbet on the turn, 3.5%, then on the river he bets 60%. And to the right of this small line, we have the bet versus skipped c-bet on the river, but with the specific sizing. That means the overbet probe bet river would be 8.3. Playing after 2 checks, that is check on the flop, and the reaction to our delayed c-bet of a specific sizing. Fold, plus fold on the river, or raise. The showdown block, the aggression block. The showdown block, which has went to showdown, won at showdown, and won when saw flop, is also split by total, and specifically single raised pot as caller. And to the right here we have the pre-flop block, some basic information, cold calls 3 bets, folds to 4 bets, call 4 bet, 5 bet, overcall, how often the opponent calls when someone has already called, and squeeze stats, where squeeze is the opposite to overcall. Squeeze into one opponent, squeeze into 2 opponents, squeeze fold, isolation 3 bet, that is someone limps, then another player ISO raises, and the hero 3 bets. This makes it an isolation 3 bet. ISO 3 bet fold, and ISO 3 bet 4 bet. We also have the cold call of 3 bets, when there is an open raise and a 3 bet, and our hero cold calls the 3 bet. Or cold 4 bet. Someone raises, someone 3 bets, and hero 4 bets. Now we have the total stats here, out of position big blind and out of position small blind, but we can also select a specific position and examine the information more thoroughly. Big blind versus button, big blind versus cutoff, big blind versus MP2, and big blind versus early positions.